The night was calm, painted in deep shades of navy blue and silver. From 30,000 feet above the Pacific, the world below looked peaceful, cities glimmered like scattered diamonds on black velvet. The hum of the engines filled the silence, a lullaby for the tired souls aboard Flight 762 bound for Washington, D.C. Inside the dimly lit cabin, time felt suspended. Most passengers had already surrendered to sleep, their faces softened under the low amber glow of the overhead lights. A baby whimpered somewhere in the back, a soft shushing sound followed, and then, quiet again. The rhythmic drone of the jet made everything feel distant, dreamlike, as if nothing could disturb this fragile bubble in the sky. But not everyone was asleep. In seat 17A, a young woman sat by the window, her posture straight, her movements controlled, her gaze steady but unreadable. The world might have seen her as ordinary, unremarkable even. Her name, printed neatly on the boarding pass tucked in her seat pocket, read Lena Brooks. To anyone glancing her way, she was just another traveler returning home from a long shift, her waitress uniform partly visible under a light gray sweater, a notebook resting open on her lap. A cheap ballpoint pen tapped rhythmically against the paper, as if following some silent code only she could hear. But if anyone had looked closer, they might have noticed small things, things that didn't quite fit the picture of an exhausted waitress. Her hands were too steady, her nails short and clean, like someone used to discipline. The way she scanned the aisle wasn't the distracted glance of a tired worker, it was the precise sweep of someone trained to read a room. Her eyes lingered a second too long on exits, on crew members, on the cockpit door. And every time the captain's voice came over the intercom, even for routine updates, Lena's pen froze midair. To her left, an elderly man snored softly, head resting against the window. A teenage boy across the aisle watched a movie with his headphones half fallen from his ears. No one noticed her, no one ever did, and that was exactly how she liked it. Outside the window, clouds drifted past like slow-moving ghosts. Lena watched their shapes dissolve against the moonlight. Somewhere far below, a thunderstorm flashed, silent from this height, like distant fireworks. She turned back to her notebook, flipping a page that looked more like a coded message than journal notes. Strange symbols, coordinates, and short phrases filled the pages, lines that would make no sense to anyone else. "Stay invisible," she whispered under her breath. Her lips barely moved, but her pulse quickened slightly, a habit she had developed years ago, during the kind of training that most people only saw in spy thrillers. In the faint reflection of the window, her own eyes stared back at her. Calm, controlled, deceptively ordinary, but inside, a storm brewed. She hadn't planned to take this flight. Her ticket was bought last minute, the route changed twice. The original plan was compromised. A whisper from an old contact, a warning, had forced her to switch planes, to blend in among civilians once more. Now, at 37,000 feet, she was between worlds, one where she played the part of a simple waitress, and another where she was something else entirely. The plane rocked gently through light turbulence, and Lena's hand instinctively reached for the armrest. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal of a hidden compartment under her seat. Inside, a small metallic device no larger than a matchbox rested, taped securely out of sight. No one knew it was there. Her heartbeat steadied again. She leaned back, closing her notebook carefully, sliding it into her bag. From the outside, it was just a worn leather purse, scratched, faded, completely unremarkable. Inside, however, it held more secrets than most people could imagine. Across the aisle, the flight attendant moved slowly down the cabin, checking seatbelts and tray tables. Lena smiled politely when the woman passed, nodding like any other passenger. The attendant smiled back, unaware that she had just exchanged pleasantries with someone who, until 3 years ago, didn't officially exist. Lena turned her head slightly, pretending to adjust the air vent above her seat, but in truth, she was studying the cockpit door. 2 reinforced locks, no signs of tampering, a standard model Boeing, nothing unusual. And yet, her instincts told her something was off. The captain had been quiet for too long. The co-pilot's voice hadn't come through once since takeoff. The cabin crew seemed calm, but there was tension in their body language, a stiffness in their smiles, a forced cheerfulness when talking to passengers. She'd learned to read those signs the hard way. Lena shifted in her seat, glancing at her reflection again. To anyone else, she was invisible. But to those who knew her, those who still hunted for the ghost they once called Falcon, she was anything but. Falcon. The name haunted her. Once, it had meant pride, precision, and power. Now, it was a curse, a label she'd buried deep beneath years of silence. Her last mission had ended badly. People she trusted had vanished. Orders had changed mid-operation. The agency she'd given everything to had turned its back. And somewhere in that chaos, she had become the target. She exhaled slowly, trying to push the memories away. But they clung to her mind like static. The gunfire, the rain-soaked alley, the voice over the comm saying, "Abort. Falcon is compromised." She had run ever since. Now, sitting here on this quiet night flight, she should have felt safe. She had new papers, a new identity, and a story so ordinary it could put anyone to sleep. Lena Brooks, 29, waitress at Miller's Diner, Seattle. It was perfect, boring, forgettable. But safety was an illusion. Her instinct screamed that someone, somewhere, still remembered her. That eyes she couldn't see were still watching. She checked her watch, an old analog model, but the second hand was moving too slowly. Or maybe time itself had slowed. Only 2 hours left until landing. 2 hours until she could disappear again. Then, a faint vibration buzzed against her wrist. Lena froze. It wasn't her watch, it was the small metal band beneath it, hidden from view. A signal, encrypted, unauthorized. Her eyes darted around the cabin. Nobody was looking her way. The message was silent, only a pulse pattern that she alone could read. 3 long, 2 short, 3 long. Her breath caught. That pattern hadn't been used in years, not since her agency days. It meant one thing: you've been found. She looked down at her bag, pretending to rummage through it. With one subtle movement, she pressed her thumb against the corner of the leather strap, activating a micro receiver. Static hissed quietly in her left ear. Then a voice, faint but unmistakable, cut through the noise. Greater than, Falcon, you're compromised. 2 minutes to intercept. Stay seated. Her blood ran cold. Falcon, the name she'd buried, spoken again after all these years. She looked out the window. The dark sky stretched endlessly, calm, silent, undisturbed. But deep down, she knew what that message meant. It wasn't turbulence that was coming. Her pen slipped from her hand and rolled onto the floor. The elderly man beside her stirred but didn't wake. Lena bent down slowly to retrieve it, masking the panic rising inside her. When she sat back up, her reflection in the window no longer looked calm. It looked ready. Somewhere in the distance, invisible to everyone else, the first faint glimmer of jet lights moved across the night sky. She leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. Her fingers brushed against the hidden badge inside her bag, the metal still cold to the touch. If this was the end of her running, she would face it head-on. The quiet waitress in seat 17A was gone. The cabin lights flickered once, a quick, almost invisible pulse, and then steadied again. Most passengers didn't even notice, but Lena Brooks did. Her eyes snapped open instantly. Something had changed. The quiet hum of the engines seemed louder now, their rhythm just slightly off. Her instinct sharpened like a blade, the kind of awareness that could never truly fade no matter how long she tried to live a normal life. She sat perfectly still, pretending to adjust her seatbelt. In reality, she was listening, not to the passengers, not to the flight attendant's muffled chatter, but to the distant static whispering through her hidden earpiece. Then came the voice again. Greater than, Falcon, confirm status. Lena's heart tightened, but her voice was steady, soft enough that no one around her could hear. Greater than, still on board. Signal acknowledged. What's happening? There was a long pause. She could hear background noise, heavy breathing, radio chatter, something that sounded like wind cutting across a microphone. Then the voice returned, colder this time. Greater than, interceptors inbound. Maintain cover. Do not reveal unless forced. She felt the blood drain from her face. Interceptors, up here, that meant only one thing. Someone, somewhere, had flagged this aircraft as a potential threat. And if the U.S. Air Force was involved, her cover was no longer just cracked, it was shattered. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't move. The man beside her snored softly. A flight attendant rolled a service cart down the aisle, smiling gently at a passenger asking for water. Everything looked so normal, heartbreakingly normal. And yet, above the clouds, warplanes were closing in. Lena's mind raced. She'd taken precautions, fake IDs, alternate routes, shadow encryption, but none of it should have led anyone here. Unless someone had betrayed her. Unless this flight wasn't random at all. The intercom crackled. Greater than, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. His tone was calm, but not natural. She could hear the strain beneath every word. Greater than, we've just received a communication from ground control. There's a minor issue with our transponder. We're required to follow a new course heading temporarily. Please remain seated. A few passengers looked up, murmuring quietly. The teenager across the aisle paused his movie, removing one headphone. An elderly couple exchanged confused glances. Lena's heart pounded harder. Minor issue, she repeated silently. That phrase, she'd heard it before. It was code, used in emergency protocols. The captain was hiding something. She turned her head toward the window, her fingers tightening around the armrest. And then she saw them. Two F-22 Raptors, sleek and silver under the moonlight, emerging from the clouds like silent predators. They flew in perfect formation, one slightly above, one to the right, their navigation lights blinking faintly red and green against the dark sky. Even from this distance, Lena could feel their presence like a storm approaching. Passengers began noticing now. Someone near the back pointed out the window. Greater than, hey, are those military jets? A ripple of unease spread through the cabin. The flight attendant's smile faltered for a second, then returned, too quick, too practiced. Greater than, everything's fine, sir. Just a precautionary escort. Lena knew better. The Air Force didn't scramble Raptors for precautionary escorts. Not unless there was a credible threat. She leaned slightly forward, trying to catch the faint hum of the radio through her earpiece again. Greater than, control to Falcon, identification request incoming. They know you're on board. Her blood ran cold. Greater than, how? She whispered. Greater than, we don't know. Someone leaked your alias. Your location's been triangulated. They're demanding verification of a passenger, codename, Falcon. Her heart pounded so loudly it almost drowned out the voice. The captain's intercom came on again, and this time, there was no pretending. Greater than, attention passengers, we've been contacted by the United States Air Force. They've requested communication with one of our passengers. The cabin went silent. Lena's breathing slowed. The entire plane felt frozen in time, everyone waiting, confused, scared, whispering. Greater than, they are requesting the presence of someone identified only as Falcon. Gasps rippled through the cabin. People looked at each other, bewildered. A businessman in 14C muttered, Falcon. What's that? A call sign. A child began crying. The mother shushed him softly, fear trembling in her hands. Lena stayed perfectly still. She could feel every pair of eyes around her scanning the rows, searching for some clue. The captain's voice cracked slightly before cutting off, replaced by a heavy silence. The Air Force was waiting for a response. She closed her eyes, the memories flooding back, the field operations, the betrayals, the missions that went wrong. The way she'd sworn never to let this name surface again. Falcon. She had run from that identity for so long. But it had finally caught up to her, 37,000 feet above the ground. Her instinct screamed at her to stay hidden, to let them keep searching. But she knew what would happen if she didn't step forward. If the Air Force believed there was a threat aboard, they could force the plane to descend. They could order an emergency landing. They could shoot them down. And she couldn't let that happen, not to these people. The old man beside her stirred, yawning as he looked out the window. Greater than, well, that's not something you see every day, he chuckled weakly. Lena smiled faintly, her mind already made up. She reached under her sweater, fingers brushing the metal clasp of her hidden badge, one she'd sworn never to use again. It still bore the insignia of the Intelligence Division. Her past, etched in steel. She stood up slowly. The aisle seemed impossibly long, stretching like a tunnel under the dim cabin lights. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. The teenage boy across the aisle pulled off his headphones, blinking in confusion. A flight attendant rushed forward. Greater than, ma'am, please stay seated. Lena raised her hand gently. Greater than, it's okay. They're looking for me. Her voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that came after years of fear. The attendant froze, eyes wide, uncertain whether to believe her. Greater than, you're Falcon. Lena nodded once. Gasps spread again. The cabin buzzed with low whispers, disbelief, fear, awe. Some passengers pulled out phones before being told to turn them off. She reached into her bag, pulling out the worn leather notebook, the same one she'd been writing in earlier. But this time, she opened a hidden compartment on the back cover, revealing a small metallic badge marked with a single word, Clearance Alpha. She handed it to the flight attendant. Greater than, tell the captain to open the channel. I'll speak with them. The woman hesitated, then hurried toward the cockpit. Lena turned toward the window. The F-22s were closer now, she could almost see the pilots' visors glinting in the moonlight. They were waiting for confirmation. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then the intercom crackled again, but this time it wasn't the captain, it was a man's voice, deep, authoritative, unmistakably military. Greater than, Falcon, this is Eagle 1. Confirm your identity. Lena exhaled slowly. Greater than, this is Falcon. Identification code 3 Delta 79. Standing by. A pause. Then another voice, softer this time, familiar, came through the line. Greater than, you're a hard woman to find. Her chest tightened. She knew that voice. Greater than, Commander Reyes, she said quietly. You're still chasing ghosts, I see. Greater than, not ghosts, Lena. Just one. You shouldn't have boarded that plane. Greater than, I didn't have a choice. Greater than, you never do. There was a brief silence. The cabin was dead quiet. Passengers could hear only fragments of the transmission through the overhead speakers. Greater than, you're coming with us, Reyes said finally. We'll escort the plane to Andrews Air Base. No one gets hurt. Lena's jaw tightened. She knew what that meant. Debriefing, interrogation, perhaps worse. But if she refused, every innocent life on this plane would be at risk. Greater than, copy that, she said softly. Falcon out. She sank back into her seat, her eyes still on the window. The Raptors drifted closer, their silhouettes sharp against the stars. Outside, the world was endless and cold. Inside, the tension was thick enough to choke on. The old man beside her leaned in slightly, whispering. Greater than, you really one of them. Lena smiled faintly. Greater than, something like that. Then she looked forward, her reflection faint in the glass, the face of someone who'd stopped running. The waitress in seat 17A was gone. Now, only Falcon remained, and the night had just begun. The world outside was silent, a boundless ocean of darkness pierced only by the cold gleam of moonlight on steel. The F-22 Raptors still flanked the plane, their sleek bodies ghost-like against the stars. Inside the cabin, tension pulsed through the air like electricity waiting to strike. Every passenger was awake now, eyes wide, whispering, watching. Some clutched their armrests, others stared straight ahead, too afraid to move. Mothers held their children close, businessmen who had once barked orders into phones now sat frozen, pale and powerless. And at the center of it all, in seat 17A, sat Lena Brooks, or rather, Falcon. She kept her gaze fixed out the window, calm on the surface but burning with a storm beneath. Her reflection stared back at her, tired eyes, steady breath, unflinching resolve. The reflection of a woman who had finally stopped running. From the front of the cabin, the flight attendant approached slowly, clutching the radio handset. Her hand trembled slightly as she whispered. Greater than, they want to talk again. Lena nodded once, rising from her seat with quiet purpose. Every step down the aisle echoed through the still cabin, the soft thud of her boots the only sound in the silence. As she reached the cockpit door, the captain turned toward her. Sweat dotted his forehead, and his voice shook as he asked. Greater than, who are you? Lena's eyes softened. Greater than, just someone who's been trying to forget. He stared at her for a long moment, then, wordlessly, he handed her the headset. She put it on. Greater than, this is Falcon. The radio crackled. The same deep voice answered. Greater than, Falcon, this is Eagle 1. You are to remain on board until touchdown. Ground team is waiting. Do not engage. Her tone was calm but laced with iron. Greater than, you're scrambling Raptors for a civilian flight, Commander. That's not protocol. What's really going on? A pause. Static hissed softly. Then the voice of Commander Reyes came through again, quieter this time. Greater than, there's chatter from multiple sources. Someone sold your location. We have confirmation of an attempt, tonight. Her hand clenched around the headset. Greater than, an attempt. On me. Greater than, on everyone. Someone planted a device before takeoff. Cargo deck. Pressure triggered. Whoever wanted you dead wanted no survivors. The blood drained from her face. She turned sharply toward the cockpit panel, her mind racing. The entire plane, every passenger, every innocent, was sitting on a bomb. Greater than, how long? She demanded. Greater than, unknown. Could be minutes. Lena ripped off the headset, adrenaline burning through her veins. Greater than, open the cargo access. Now, she barked. The captain blinked in shock. Greater than, I can't, we're in mid-flight. Greater than, Then depressurize Section 9 manually. If I don't get down there, everyone dies. The co-pilot hesitated, then nodded grimly, flipping the emergency override switch. A warning light flared red on the console, cargo bay override engaged. Lena tore off her sweater, revealing the black tactical undersuit beneath, lightweight, flexible, built for missions she thought she'd left behind. Her movements were sharp, practiced, almost mechanical. The captain stared. Greater than, "You're not a waitress, are you?" A faint smile crossed her lips. Greater than, "Not tonight." Without another word, she pushed open the service hatch and disappeared into the narrow maintenance corridor below. The space was cramped and freezing. Metal panels vibrated beneath her hands as the engines roared outside the fuselage. She moved fast, climbing down the narrow ladder that led to the lower deck, her flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Each step echoed in her chest like a countdown. When she reached the cargo bay, the temperature dropped sharply. Her breath fogged in the air. Rows of suitcases and freight containers lined the walls, all secured, all except one. A black crate, slightly ajar, sat near the center of the floor. She approached slowly, kneeling beside it. The hinges had been tampered with, expertly. Inside, nestled between false panels, was a small metallic cylinder pulsing with a faint blue light. Lena exhaled sharply. A micro-triggered explosive, advanced, military-grade, pressure-sensitive. She had disarmed worse, but not at 37,000 feet with 200 lives depending on her. Greater than, Eagle 1, she whispered into her wrist comm. Device located. Military tech, not commercial. Someone knew exactly where I'd be. Reyes's voice came through, tight and urgent. Greater than, "We can't guide you remotely, the signal's too weak at that depth. You're on your own." Greater than, "Wouldn't be the first time," she muttered. Her fingers worked quickly, tracing the wires, red, blue, green, standard color coding, but reversed polarity. A trap for amateurs. She recognized the pattern instantly. Whoever built this had known her methods. Her heartbeat slowed. She took a long, steady breath. One wrong move, and there would be no second chance. Sweat trickled down her temple as she clipped the first wire. Then the second. The light flickered once, then stabilized. She hesitated over the final connector. It was different, shielded, magnetic. Something about it didn't fit the design. Her mind flashed back to an old training session, a memory buried deep, her instructor's voice echoing. Greater than, "When they want you to fail, they'll make the last wire lie." She smiled faintly. Old trick, Reyes. Instead of cutting it, she reached for a small EMP chip from her belt, one of the few remnants of her field kit she'd kept all these years, and pressed it gently against the core. The device whined softly, then went dark. Silence. Lena exhaled a long, shaky breath. Greater than, "Device neutralized," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell your men to stand down." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the engines above her. Then the radio crackled again. Greater than, "Copy that, Falcon. Good work." She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel, not the cold precision of survival, but the fragile relief of victory. After a minute, she climbed back up the ladder, pushing open the hatch. The passengers stared in stunned silence as she emerged, covered in grease, breathing hard, but alive. The captain met her eyes, his voice trembling. Greater than, "Is it over?" Lena nodded. Greater than, "For now." The cabin erupted in nervous applause, hesitant at first, then growing louder, until the whole plane seemed to shake with it. She didn't smile. She just sat back in her seat, staring out the window once more. The Raptors still flanked them, but their formation had changed, looser now, protective rather than threatening. Through the headset still resting on her shoulder, Reyes's voice returned, quieter, almost human. Greater than, "You could have run again, Lena. You didn't." Greater than, "I'm tired of running," she said softly. "Let's just get these people home." There was a long pause. Then he replied, greater than, "Understood. Welcome back, Falcon." The words hit her harder than she expected. Welcome back. A phrase she thought she'd never hear again. As the plane began its slow descent toward Washington, dawn started to break over the horizon. The first light spilled across the clouds like gold over silk, washing away the night's terror. The passengers leaned toward the windows, whispering in awe, relieved, alive, unaware that the woman sitting among them had just saved their lives. Lena turned her gaze to the sunrise. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something close to peace. She knew this wasn't the end. The people who had hunted her were still out there. The betrayal that had destroyed her life still lingered in the shadows. But for now, she had given these people another sunrise, and that was enough. As the wheels touched down on the runway, the passengers broke into applause again, louder this time, pure and grateful. Lena smiled faintly, whispering to herself, "Greater than, seat 17A. One last flight." When the plane finally stopped, she stood, slinging her worn leather bag over her shoulder. Inside it, the old badge glinted faintly in the light, a symbol of a life she could no longer escape. As she stepped out of the cabin, the first rays of morning hit her face. Soldiers waited on the tarmac, not as enemies, but as escorts. Commander Reyes stood among them, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met. He nodded once. "Greater than, you did good." She looked past him, toward the rising sun. "Greater than, it's not over yet." And with that, Falcon walked into the dawn, no longer a ghost, no longer running, but finally ready to face whatever waited beyond the horizon.